Test. All right. Testing. Sorry, my OBS was being weird. All I was saying is I wasn't saying anything you guys missed. All I was saying is I'm sharing the live stream on social media, so you didn't miss anything. Oh, I also said I might turn the sound down because I can hear a dog outside. Okay. Hey, people in the chat. I guess I'll just look down at this today. Oh, you're getting notifications for your streams. Most people should. I think streaming is one of the things that gets the most notifications. Well, obviously, you got to put the bell on properly. Yeah, so something before I'm gonna wait for a bit before we go into these articles. But something I've said consistently on my channel when I've been talking about like conservatism in America is conservatism. I've been saying this for years. I haven't been saying it like late, like it's not something I've recently been saying like every day, but like I've been saying if you go back on my channel when I talk about anti-SJW YouTube sometime, I'm like mainstream conservatism in America is fascist. Like I'm not even trying to like be inflammatory. It is just fascist, especially since Donald Trump. It's like overtly fascist, and I think there's a distinction to be made between in the past between Republican voters and the Republican Party, right? So, in my opinion, George Bush's government was one of the most fascist U.S. governments in history, right? And he might get away with it because he seems like a bit of an idiot, but you know what they did in that government in terms of how they manipulated the court system, enacted this massive surveillance state, basically took away most Americans' rights. Guantanamo Bay, throwing people in without a trial, a lot of people innocent, stuck in Guantanamo Bay for 20 years. Yeah, all of this stuff. George Bush was a fascist, and he used the Supreme Court and interpretations by people on the Supreme Court that allowed his fascism. And it's funny. What I love so much, I always find a way to get this back to Metal Gear Solid. In Metal Gear Rising, you guys might have seen it, the memes of that Senator Armstrong. Metal Gear Rising is essentially a massive criticism of US fascism after 9/11. And when you're fighting the boss at the end, when he's in his Metal Gear, he's screaming at you, you're either with us or against us. And basically, the point of the game is to criticize the war on terror. References 9/11 a ton, references WMDs in Iraq and how it was used to make Americans support the war and everything like that. So yeah, that's something. And someone in the chat just asked me quick, is that not the case in Europe and the UK, right? So mainstream European conservatism, I wouldn't say is fascist. And I think the term we have to use, like, you can say people are fascist, right? I would argue that the current government in the UK has a lot of fascist tendencies, right? But I'm talking more about the inherent nationalism, the criminalizing protest, treating refugees and migrants like absolute shit, right? I would say they're definitely fascist leaning. I would say the difference with them compared to American conservatives is American conservatives are not subtle at all, and mainly their appeal to people is based on racism and fascism. They don't even try and hide it. Like we saw recently as a candidate, I think, for some sort of political office, I need to find the account. She basically was talking about the Great Replacement theory recently. So I'd say, as much as I hate European conservatism, what the GOP are remind me of groups like the DUP in Northern Ireland, or remind me of like Britain First, or they remind me of basically British fascists. That's what they remind me of. Whereas, as much as I hate UK conservatism, and I'm not even going to like defend it at all, there is a distinction to be made between UK conservatism and American conservatism, and the one is American conservatism. Like the thing is, here's a question for the chat right now. If you ask most American conservatives, if Trump could be installed as a king and we could just get rid of the democracy and, I don't know, arrest every single Democrat and put them in prison and bar Democrats from running from office, how many Republicans would agree with that statement? How many Republicans would want that? In the chat right now, give me a percentage. How many Republicans would want Trump as a king or a dictator? I would argue it's probably about 75%. I honestly think it is. Like, Republicans don't care about democracy. No talking head on American conservative media gives a shit about democracy. They would make Republicans dictators for life if they could, right? They don't want to win based on like ideas or anything like that. It's literally like, make us in charge forever, and that's it. Like Trump, you know, throwing people in vans and Black Lives Matter, like that's a good thing. And even like Jan 6th now, like they used to pretend they like were a bit outraged by it, but now they're saying it's a good thing, basically. 80% people are saying 80 over 70, 60 over 70, 1/3, lower end 45, 55%, 65%, I want to say 50%. Just read some more comments. 93.2%. Yeah, so I've said this for a long time. American conservatism is so far right. It's literally just all based on racism, like absolutely unfiltered racism about Mexicans, about Muslims, black people. These dog whistles are not subtle, like backing the fascist police forces, no matter what they do, backing the fascist Israeli settlers or the Israeli government and stuff like that. They do not give a shit, like, at all. And I would also argue, because, you know, the US Democrats are a right-wing party, right? They remind me of the Conservatives here. There isn't really... The only thing that differentiates the Democrats from the Conservatives in the UK are the Democrats will pay lip service to social progressivism while doing, like, fuck all to promote economic policies that actually enact stuff that will help socially progressive causes. But the Republicans literally are like any far-right party. They remind me of Le Pen in France. They remind me of Polish people far-right. Tucker Carlson says he wants the US to be more like Hungary, ruled by far-right anti-Semites, anti-Muslim, racist, authoritarian Orban, right? He is the main voice of the Republicans right now. So many people listen to him on Fox News as one of the most popular shows, and he promotes all this shit constantly. And you know, America has always been a fundamentally racist country, but there used to be a time in American politics where this is another problem with the polarization. There used to be a time in American politics where the parties, not saying they weren't so different, but you could be someone who votes Republican and then switches to Democrat, like fairly easily. Like look at Nixon and JFK, one of the closest elections. Then look at Ronald Reagan completely sweeping the electoral map, or just look at various elections like that. Like you have people back in the day who might switch, and when you hear stuff about like Gerald Ford, for example, when he used to be in Congress, these were Republicans who, as much as they were bad people, they played within the political rules. Like Nixon resigned for Watergate, because the Dems obviously controlled the Senate, I think, or they controlled Congress. I forget which one. Watergate, like Nixon was like worse than a lot of presidents, right? What he actually resigned for with Watergate, I think Trump did way worse stuff multiple times, and he would never resign. Trump would never resign for Watergate. Republicans would never want him to resign for Watergate. They think it's a great thing. Oh, you spied on the Democrats. You bugged the Democratic headquarters. That's a good thing. Like, get those Democrats, spy on them. Again, like, it's such a shift. Like, yeah, Nixon. The thing with Nixon is, as evil as he was, he at least knew you had to keep most of it secret. Like, you couldn't go around, as racist as hell as Nixon was, you couldn't go around saying, like, when he was racist in public, he had to dog whistle, right? Talking about, what was the thing he talked about? The war on drugs and stuff like that. That there are stuff you can see, and you're like, oh, Nixon's a massive racist. but he has to pretend to be like a president for all Americans. Like when you actually listen, because I had to listen to a lot of Nixon at university. Nixon was like a really smart guy, and he was like a very good person at making speeches. He couldn't. Nixon would probably be run out of the Conservative Party. Like if Nixon was around today, if he was still alive, I think most Republicans would fucking hate him, and they wouldn't hate him for Watergate. They'd hate him for like him not being like a total ideological fascist. Even though Nixon was literally one of the worst people in American history in the last, I don't know, 100 years or something. Biggest death count. Must have the highest death toll, to be honest. Death toll or body count is what I was looking for. So yeah, like it's just one of these things. It's like the Republican Party has jumped so like there's two elements to it. There's like the Bush fascism, which was the government, and they use that fascism to whip people up to vote for them. And it was all based on hysteria around 9/11. So they took something that was obviously like a terrible event, and they just used it to scare people into voting for them and molding the US government into their image. Whereas I don't think everyone who voted for Bush, like a lot of people who hate all Russians right now, should probably have some introspection that most Americans supported the Iraq War. America voted for Bush again. He won the popular vote. Sorry, there's a dog barking. Let me turn this down for a sec. Give me a sec. Just close the window. Alright, hopefully you can't hear it that much now. I'll just get a bit closer. Yeah, so he won the popular vote. So America, like you could say, when people say like punish all Russians for what's going on in Ukraine, I think Russia is dictatorship. Most Americans supported the Iraq War, which probably killed 1 million people, poisoned countless generations in Iraq. But then I would say most people who voted for Bush the second time were probably manipulated to do it, and I don't think everyone who voted for Bush was probably a fascist. I would say every Republican now who votes for the Republican Party, while they might be extremely ignorant about politics, because we all know those people who will just vote. And I think in America, it's like, we're a Republican voting family. And it's like, you all vote the same way because you're in the same family. Like, this is a Republican household. And so I understand that people might not be ideological fascists voting for them, but even with what they see in the media, they are complicit in this, and they won't be turned off voting for fascism, right? And I'm not talking about people who watch Fox News every night. I'm talking about just like probably like some white fucking middle class racist suburban families who will just be like, we'll vote Republican because that's what you do. Maybe don't pay attention so much to the news or whatever. But I'd say anyone who pays attention, anyone who cares about politics in the slightest who votes Republican is a fascist, in my opinion. And here's a problem, right? And I have this problem with class reductionists. The half of America doesn't vote. Half of America does not vote in the presidential election. A lot of those people are people you should be targeting with electoral policies, to get those people to vote for you. A lot of class reductionist leftists think that if you put advocating for transgender rights to the side and just focus on economic policies, a lot of these people would support you. And I completely reject that in a lot of ways, because while you can get these Republicans to hate Amazon, while you can get these Republicans to hate Disney, they don't hate them because they're exploitative corporations. They don't hate them because they treat their workers like garbage. They hate them because they think they're woke, and they think these corporations are leftist, right? They hate them because they think they're leftist. They don't hate them because they're horrible corporations. So getting a Republican fascist voter, or an ideological fascist who supports the Republican Party, to come over to the leftist side based on economic things, I think is for a lot of people, especially now, is a losing argument, because they don't hate Disney because it's a horrible corporation. Ron DeSantis' war on Disney is popular because they think it's a war on woke and LGBT rights. They don't think it's a war against exploitative corporations and capitalism run amok and stuff like that. So that's why I think when people talk about don't care about woke politics, I think there are so many people in America you could get to vote for you who don't support the Republican Party. Like I said, was it 70 something million for Biden? Was it 80 million for Biden, 70 something million for Trump? So what's that? Is that even half of America? Half of Americans didn't vote, but when you want to try and appeal to these Republican fascists and try and get them on board, they don't share your politics, and they don't care so much because even the ones who can recognize their economic situation is bad, right? Like Republican people aren't immune to insane healthcare costs or rising price of like necessities and things like that. Even if you could get those people to recognize those problems, abortion, war on trans people and LGBT people, that's always going to make sure they vote for the Republicans, because it's always this culture war. So I'm just looking for my headphones. It's always this culture war thing, and that's what Republicans have always done. It's just the culture war, isn't it? Like distract people with abortion, Second Amendment, and then loot their pockets. So I'm just grabbing my AirPods behind me. So yeah, people who think that you can convince a lot of these people that you would ever... But then here's the other problem, right? You're trying to convince them and trying to get them to vote for the Democrats, right? So the Democrats are a shitty party as well. And they also play this culture war bullshit too. I said this on Twitter the other day. Democrats are happy to engage in the other side of the culture war. So Republicans are like, anyone should have a gun. Everyone should have a gun, actually. No matter if you're a criminal on the no-fly list, you should be allowed a gun. It's your God-given right to own a gun. Democrats will say, we don't think that. We want gun control, but we'll never do anything about it. Like, we'll never even... has Biden even tried to do anything about gun reform? I don't think he has. Same with abortion. It's like, Republicans, we want to make abortion illegal. Democrats, we want to do the bare minimum and agree with a Supreme Court ruling from 1973. But we're not going to actually do anything about it. Like, we're not going to make that the law of the land. We're just not going to do that. So they're playing this culture war as well, because now the Democrats will say, well, you got to vote blue to protect abortion. And they did that in 2016 and they did that in 2020. You've got to vote Clinton to protect abortion. You've got to vote Biden to protect abortion, protect Roe v. Wade. Oh, now he's in. Is he even trying? Is he even making the Republicans filibuster it? Like, they say, oh, the filibuster. I would say, make the Republicans sweat and make them actually filibuster something. Like, people acting like, because the filibuster exists, you should just make it easy for people. Make Mitch McConnell do a fucking 10-hour speech. Like, make him do that. Why are you letting them get away with it? Actually do something. Like, it's so ridiculous. Like, oh, we cannot do anything because they're filibuster it. Well, make them actually filibuster it. Like, make them do this. They're all fucking like 80 years old. Make them stand in the Senate for 10 hours rambling without a break. So the thing is now, it's like, for a lot of people, you have Republicans who are being activists on fascism, Democrats doing nothing. Like, even Gavin Newsom said, the governor of California, he said, where are the Democrats in this abortion stuff? Where are they? What are they doing? They're not doing anything. They're just lying down and taking it because they're fucking losers. And it's made me even think, are Democrats just paid to lose? Like, seriously, is that even a conspiracy anymore? Are they just paid to fucking lose? Like, they're the weakest party I've ever seen. They don't even try and fight back. Like, it's just so fucking ridiculous. So in my opinion, like, American conservatism has been fascist for a long, long time. And it's always had the fascist undertones. The stuff with Ronald Reagan, Nixon. With George Bush, it literally just was fascist. Like, literally, you were either with America or you are against America. No nuance. We'll get people banned off, like, hosting TV shows and news shows if you speak out against the Iraq War or Afghanistan. Spy on every American, potentially, without them knowing. Throw people into Gitmo with no trial. All that sort of shit. And then with Trump, it was just like, nah, like, I will literally just be the most racist fucking person ever. And I will literally throw left-wing protesters into vans and have them escorted away by military people with no badges, inciting uprising against the US government. And then people like DeSantis and I don't know what's happened. People like DeSantis and Trump just literally open fascists at this point. And then gerrymandering to make sure they never lose again. These people don't care. Like, in a democracy, you'd think that, and this is how the left wing often play, which is a bit stupid sometimes. It's like, we got to win on the arguments, right? We got to win on the arguments. We got to, if we lose, it's because we've done poorly and we couldn't offer the electorate anything. Where the Republicans are like, fuck you. We will try and win power based on culture war, and when we're in power, we'll rig the system so we never lose again. And that's basically it. Let's close this quick. So let's take some. Okay, I'm gonna take some comments, and I want to use the bathroom quick. Just go for a piss, and then we'll get into these good articles. This one especially, the Rolling Stone one. Oh, when did the speaking filibuster end? I've seen Bernie Sanders do it. All right. I'm going to read the manifesto tomorrow, I think. Mainstream American conservatism is made up of three contradictory things: economic right libertarianism, social conservatism, and neoconservatism. Democrats are actual conservatives, Republicans are far right. Yep, totally agree with that. Right, going a bit further. Yeah, so here's another thing which I find bizarre about American conservatism, is American conservatism. Americans are so brainwashed. I don't know what's happening with my my desktop thing. So Americans, I literally I've had conversations with Americans. I don't know if you guys remember this. Do you remember this in my Metal Gear stream when we were arguing with that guy who was telling us that Metal Gear Solid was conservative because it loved freedom or some shit like that? So this is something I found really bizarre to me, and I don't even think this is like a debate in the UK in some ways. So Americans legitimately believe the political spectrum exists like this. Conservatives are on one end, and conservatives are for freedom. Leftists are on the other end, and leftism is authoritarianism. That's the political spectrum, and I'm not joking. They literally think that. Like, the more conservative you are, the more pro-freedom you are. The more left-wing you are, the more pro-authoritarian you are. Like, how do they think this is the thing? Especially when it's so funny the conservatives are the one legislating all the laws that take away your freedoms. You know, they literally, conservatives ran the Bush administration where they spied on you and they took away loads of your rights. And apparently they love freedom. So it's this really bizarre perspective where they think for some reason that all conservatism is literally small government libertarianism. Like, there's no social aspects to it. There's no social policies. There's no religious stuff. It's literally like, you're conservative, you love freedom. You're leftist, you want authoritarianism. Not realizing that, of course, like what we're seeing in America right now and what we're going to see with the next Republican president probably is authoritarian conservatism. Like, conservatism has nothing to fucking do with freedom. The only thing I'll grant them is the only freedom that conservatism often grants is the free market, which isn't freedom for the rest of us, right? The free market, which gets dominated by massive corporations to fuck the rest of us over. That's the only freedom I hear about conservatives, and they like to tie it all together, like free market, gun rights. Okay, you get your guns and you get the free market. No abortion, illegal to be transgender in some states. You know, can't tell children about gay people existing in a school. That's not freedom. What else now is there? Like, trying to think. Oh, you know, some states you can have drugs, some states you can't have drugs, but conservatives generally aren't pro-legalization or stuff like that either. So conservatives' only arguments to stand on that they're for freedom is guns and free market capitalism. But the left-wing position, especially like an actual leftist position, isn't inherently against weapons either, especially when you live in a fascist-leaning state like America. If I was a leftist in America, I would have guns. I don't like guns inherently, and I'm glad the UK doesn't have a massive firearm culture, because there's so many horror stories in America, because America is this horrible melting pot of loads of access to guns, really poor healthcare, poor mental health care, insanity brought on by these cable news conservative shows, and a massive problem with fascist militias as well. Whereas Canada is a lot bad for a lot of these things as well, but Canada has similar gun laws, not exactly the same, but there is like more freedom to own firearms in Canada, but they do not have the same gun culture as America, or the problems of firearms Americans have. And generally, like, I believe America should have more regulation for firearms, but you know, when you live in America, especially as a left-wing person, the whole American state is hostile to your existence. The police force are hostile to existence. The government are Republican or Democrat. Fascist militias, neo-Nazi groups who will want to kill you. And it's like, yeah, so as a left-wing person from the UK, I do not support guns in my own country at the moment. But I also do support leftists owning firearms in the US because the laws aren't going to change and you've got to actually fucking defend yourself. Like, especially, like, Tactical Girlfriend is a trans American YouTuber who I featured in one of my videos, and she was saying this stuff as well. It's like, especially for trans people and women and stuff, the police aren't going to protect you, especially if you're a leftist. They're not going to protect you. You got to protect yourself. And I have seen the best example of this is, do you remember when those policemen were going around shooting random ass people on the street with it wasn't a real gun, it was like a pellet gun, and then some veteran just pulls out his assault rifle and just like shoots the cops. But then thankfully, for one time it's actually worked. The guy got off in self-defense. He didn't kill the policeman either, but like he got off. Like he literally just returned fire because they were shooting at him when he was asleep in his car or something. It was a beanbag gun, was it? One example ever of like the law actually working in favour. Just taking some comments quick. No, Josh, I'm going to talk about the article in a bit. We've still got a long stream to go, so. Yeah, lucky I didn't die. Probably a white guy. I actually do not know if he was a white guy. For some reason, I have a feeling he was a black guy, but I'm not too sure. It's 1 a.m. in the UK. Yeah. So anyway, so it's crazy to me that the American political spectrum is so poorly taught, where people generally think conservatism is about freedom, when being a conservative or leftist, I don't really think informs your position about freedom completely. Like being a left-wing person, if you're like a communist, the end goal of communism is you want everyone to be free to, pursue their own interests in life and live like a less stressful life and a life where their needs are met and stuff like that. And that's the version of freedom. If you're a conservative, I just do not associate right-wing ideologies with freedom. I don't know how you can, because if you're preserving the status quo, where you want laws against certain people existing, or laws against women, or laws against different minority groups, I don't understand how that is freedom. Libertarianism, like I understand, right? I understand how that's about freedom. It makes sense to me. It's like, leave me the fuck alone, and everyone does what they want. Although I do think, there's obviously massive problems with libertarianism. At the same time, because for me, libertarianism kind of takes a lot of the political ideology out of it, because it's like, it shouldn't matter. Like if you are a leftist libertarian or a conservative libertarian, if you're a true libertarian, you shouldn't give a shit about the rest of it. Like if you're a conservative libertarian, you should not support laws outlawing abortion, because how does that make sense? You're meant to be for freedom, right? Freedom for people to do what they want. Freedom, I guess, for doctors to do what procedures they want. So how does that inform being a libertarian? The same for like a leftist libertarian. And the only thing with leftist libertarians is different is that a lot of leftist libertarians believe in creating self-sustaining communities, where a lot of right-wing libertarians, it's all about complete individualism to do whatever the fuck you want and not really work with anyone else. Like you just, basically live to serve yourself, where leftist libertarians often are like, we should create communities together which are like libertarian and free from the government, but like we will work together for like a shared goal of, I don't know, existing peacefully together and stuff like that. Yeah, so beyond the confirming what I'm saying, I knew many people in high school who have skewed view on the political spectrum. Left is authoritarianism, right is freedom. Most conservatives I know live paycheck to paycheck and are mountains of debt. That's most Americans really, but conservatives act like their lives are better when others suffer. Yet and that's the thing, like, why it's so hard to actually get across to conservatives, and I said this earlier, is like, I'm sure at least 50% of conservative voters have some sort of problems with debt, healthcare, job security, I don't know, wages, everything like that. But it's so hard to get to them because the brainwashing is so strong, especially American evangelicism as well. You cannot, and also I would say, like, a lot of, like, maybe in more rural areas, you grow up in a community that would be like predominantly white Christian. You'll all watch the same news. You'll all watch Tucker Carlson and Fox. You'll all think Ben Shapiro's views are like the smartest guy fucking ever. Like, how can this guy be a fascist? And you all believe these things together, and I think that's very powerful because you grow up in a community where there's no nuance. And the problem is with America as well. If you live in like Midwest rural America, you're so fucking isolated from the rest of the world. Loads of Americans do not have passports. Loads of Americans never go to another country in their life because for a lot of them, completely unaffordable. You can't walk there. You can't get a cheap boat somewhere. You just literally you're stuck in America. The only thing you can do is drive to other parts of America. And if you have a passport, you can't go to other parts in North America or Central America either. Whereas at least in Europe, because not just the European Union, but Europe as a landmass, there's so many different states on it. If you're in the UK, I don't know how many of you will be watching from the UK. You'll get cheap school trips to France at least, or to Germany or to Austria, places in the European Union that I used to live. Most, a lot of English people have been to Ireland. Like, I'm from an Irish background. Of course, I've been to Ireland. Scotland as well, like I guess is another country that is quite similar, is in the UK. Does have some differences. Wales as well. And I guess England is different in a sense that you cannot grow up in rural England and not be close to a city, pretty much. Like, you will be far away from a city in some regards, but you could probably drive to one in about 3 hours. I drove from London to Scotland, right? So past most of UK's biggest cities. When you get to the north of England, there are so many cities, like so many. And obviously cities, because of the diversity they often have, often more left-wing politics exist there as well. You cannot stay as isolated in your worldview that and I think there are so many little racist communities in the UK. I'm not even disputing that. I'm just saying there's something about American isolationism, not in terms of like the foreign policy, in terms of like how isolated people are in America from the rest of the world, while at the same time being fed all this bullshit that they are the greatest country on earth. And the education in America sucks as well. So how can a lot of these American conservatives not believe that? They're so brainwashed. Like if you we talk about ISIS and like fundamentalist Islamic groups, but it's the same type of shit. It's like they're brainwashed by religion. They're brainwashed by, if they're from a country like Saudi Arabia, maybe like nationalism, Gulf states, by the monarchy and stuff. But the US is the same. You're so brainwashed to think this is the peak of humanity. Scary socialist Venezuela and Cuba, look how bad they have it there. Or scary socialist Europe or Norway or some shit. For the record, I don't consider Norway or Scandinavian countries socialist either. But it's like you grow up in these communities, and I spoke to a couple people online, obviously speaking to Americans, who say I broke out of it one day, but it's so hard because literally in America as well, what the problem is Americans. This is something that it definitely is different in the UK. There's something in the UK, the phenomenon is known as shy Tories, right? So you're a shy, that means you don't tell people you vote Conservative. You don't tell people you vote Tory because a lot of people will judge you. And I get this firsthand when I used to work up London in an office. You know who has similar politics to you. Like, you can tell. But no one is ever going to bring that up. Like, no one's ever going to say something about how pro-conservative they are. No one's going to say something about, like, how maybe even pro-Labour they are or something. Like, it's something like with politics and religion in the UK are not something to really be discussed at the workplace. You can. Like, me and my manager used to have very left-wing politics. We always used to talk about it. But having those conversations is quite awkward in the UK. Where in America, the difference is it feels like conservatives especially will love to talk about their religion and politics, and it's like the fact that you can be ostracized and kicked out of your home for not supporting a political party like the Republicans, which I've heard stories of, is insane. Like, I'm thinking about the UK right now. I can't imagine, like, I'm sure this has happened, but especially maybe in like more sectarian societies like or tribal societies like Northern Ireland maybe, I cannot imagine someone getting kicked out of their home for not voting Conservative. Like, I literally cannot imagine that. I don't think that's, even if that does happen sometimes, I don't think that sort of culture exists in the UK, where 100% I have heard multiple stories where people's family members will stop talking to them because they didn't vote the same way. And it normally is Conservative family members not talking to their family members who vote for the Democrats or something like that. And that's insane, right? Like, as much as I want everyone to have the same politics as me, because I feel like that's the best way for humanity, of course, I recognise a lot of my family members do not have the same politics as me. But the fact that they would never speak to me again, like, I know my grandparents, one side of them are fairly conservative, right? The thought of them never speaking to me again because I'm a leftist or like, you know, Marxist, communist and stuff like that, it's just, I cannot even imagine that being a thing. Like, I cannot imagine it. And you know, I have I wouldn't say I have like many conservative friends. I do have friends who probably lean more conservative. Although they're kind of like those conservatives who are like, oh, I don't care about politics and that political bullshit and shit like that. But maybe if it came down to it, maybe they would vote for the Conservatives because of things like pro-military or some crap like that. But the thought of them never speaking to me again because I'm like left wing or something is insane. Like, people in the chat, if you're from the UK, let me know. Have you ever heard something like this? Because I see so many stories like, I literally have not spoke to my mother in like 5 years because she was a big Trump supporter who couldn't handle me not voting for Trump or something like that. Dalek makes a good point. Brexit sort of had that effect. Yeah, Brexit, I would say it depends who you were. Like, I knew people personally who voted for Brexit. I judged them for sure. I was like, you're a fucking idiot. At the same time, I didn't stop being friends with them. Because, like, I think what you gotta, like, there's a difference because Brexit was extremely xenophobic. And I don't think anyone who voted for Brexit, like, the Brexit campaign in this country was not fought on economics. Like, there was no economic debate. It was about, well, if Turkey joins the EU, 100 million Muslims can come to the UK. That literally was the debate. Like terrorism and shit like that. Like massive xenophobia. So there was a degree of, you'd have to be okay enough with that. But also a lot of people just didn't pay fucking attention either. But to a degree, like, you know, you have to be okay with that xenophobia to vote for Brexit. So I get people kind of not being okay with people doing that. But at the same time, what I will say is, with Trump 2016 and Brexit 2016, I have a bit more sympathy for people who voted for that way because I believe people are fundamentally brainwashed. And I also believe people wanted things to change in their countries but did not know how to change things. So they thought, vote for something that seems pretty extreme to shake up the political order and stuff like that. Where many like leftists did not vote for Brexit. There were a couple who, because traditionally in the UK, leftists hate the EU. So there was that element. Jeremy Corbyn didn't like the EU, and I don't know if he voted for Brexit or not. I don't really give a shit, to be honest. But yeah, it's like if you, I wouldn't hold it against someone forever if they voted for Trump or if they voted for Brexit. What I would hold against them is if they voted for Trump again and if they voted for the Tories in 2019, which basically was a Brexit rerun. That's when I would start judging people. I was like, you should have learned your lesson by now. I'm running out of my sympathy for you guys. So yeah, like, but the thing is, with America, it's like, I get being very frustrated with people for voting a certain way. But when you know someone on a personal level, you can make your judgment if they were either conned, they're an idiot, or they're an idiot, or they ideologically are a fucking massive racist that you shouldn't be friends with. And I think everyone in the chat will know there's people in your life who probably have voted a way you don't agree with, and you can make the judgment if, like, they are, like I said, if they are A, idiots, B, been manipulated, or C, absolutely massive racists who just really believe this stuff. And I think for a lot of people, it's easier to forgive if it's A or B. Especially like in the UK when politics is less tribal in the sense that I feel like there's more there's more cases of people voting different parties because obviously there are different parties to vote for. Like even myself, I voted for like 4 different parties in the UK, and I'm not gonna vote for fucking Labour anytime soon. But yeah, like it's I can understand not tolerating. And the thing is, like, I'm not even saying you guys you should tolerate a Trump supporter because, like the whole video is titled, American conservatism is fascism, right? I don't want to be friends with a fascist. If someone is like a Trump supporter, and I think that's the thing people need to make a difference between is a Trump voter in 2016 and a Trump supporter in 2022. I think those can be the same things. I don't think they're necessarily the same things. Like, didn't that, like, even though I don't like him, that Ojeda guy who, like, ran for the Democratic Party in some sort of political race, he voted for Trump in 2016 or something. So I think you can change and everything, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, at this point, if you are a supporter of this, you are basically okay with fascism. That's my take on all these things. And like I was saying before, there are so many people in America who don't vote. Half the country don't vote for the president. Try and appeal to those people. Don't try and appeal to these fucking fascist voters and fascist supporters with his class reductionist bullshit that you have to not talk about culture war things like transgender rights, otherwise these racist and bigoted fucks won't vote for you. And it's like, you do not need these people. And a lot of these people will never vote for you, no matter what you do, because even on issues where they seem like they would support you, like hating corporations like Amazon and Disney, they do not hate these corporations because they are exploitative capitalist corporations. They hate them because they think they're part of the left's agenda to control America. That is it. And if these corporations, like, you know, you never see Tucker Carlson really. I know he brought that fucking guy, Chris Smalls, on to talk about like the union drive and stuff. Tucker Carlson is not covering union stuff all the time. Fox News are not painting unions in a positive way. Conservatives never paint unions in a positive way, despite the fact that a lot of conservatives are actually in fucking unions at their jobs. Unions are not painted in a positive way by conservative media or conservative political or politicians. And that's why I just feel like the culture war stuff in America is way too strong for a lot of these conservative supporters to ever have their minds changed. Despite the fact, like, the thing is as well, America has so many fucking problems that are so obvious. Opioid crisis, literally absolutely dog shit healthcare system, health insurance, which is a scam. Like, it's literally just inflating the price of everything for health insurance companies to make more money. The poverty in America is literally some of the worst I've seen in a Western nation. Like, even my girlfriend, my girlfriend went to where'd she go? The West Coast of America, and the UK has bad poverty, like really, really bad poverty for a European country. She said she's never ever seen poverty like America, like in a developed country. She said it's like tents in like a city like center, lines of tents next to shops, like proper tents, not even just like small ones, like massive tents that people brought in, like homeless people. Obviously, I got no problem with homeless people living in tents or anything like that. Like, but the problem being, why is there no state service for these people? Why are they living on fucking tents in a city centre? It's not even like out of sight, out of mind. It's literally, here is a bunch of homeless people where all you rich people like go to fucking restaurants and you don't do anything about it. Like, insane political corruption, $40 billion to Ukraine. Well, you won't do anything for COVID relief. Like, $40 billion is also like, I think the whole budget, UK's military budget for 1 year as well. It's a fucking insane amount. So it's just, for me personally, it's like, if this shit does not make people vote differently, you're never going to get this done. But not even vote differently. Like, voting is not everything. They won't even support things. Like, do you think the Amazon Union Drive or the Starbucks Union Drive is popular in conservative circles? Like removed from politics, do you think these things are popular? Do you think conservatives like this? Do you think conservatives like unions? Do you think conservatives these days like workers' rights or push for workers' rights? Or are they brainwashed by capitalists and be like, well, if that job's treating you bad, you're not being paid enough, find another job because you're allowed. It's the freedom of America. Go find a fucking other job where you don't have any healthcare and your rent is insane as well. Yeah, Blue Honor said, I feel like Blade Runner is becoming the reality here. Well, it's like, I've always said to you guys, the quote's funny. It's like, America is a third world country in a Gucci belt. I personally believe America has a lot more similarities to India, Brazil, and countries like that, where you have very, very rich upper class. You have quite a developed country in terms of like the workforce being educated, like middle class workforce being educated, like good, technology or like some sort of like industries that are very advanced. But like India does, for example, is a good example too. But then you have the middle class as well, like educated university, Brazil, India, like a lot of very smart people there who get access to education, and there's nice middle class cities and stuff in Brazil, nice middle class areas. But then like in India and Brazil, you have the favelas in places like Rio, and then you also have massive shanty towns in India, because obviously the wealth of these countries like Brazil and India, these developing economies, is built on it. That needs to exist for these people to be rich, and that's like capitalism in a nutshell. The favelas and the shanty towns exist because those people are getting rich, and America is similar, despite being less visible. Is that like Skid Row exists because of the American upper class, and to a lesser extent, like the crumbs that the middle class get fed as well. And to have this society which is so rich, Like Brazil is a rich country relatively. India is a very like rich country relatively. You need to have a very poor element of society, and Americans have tricked themselves into thinking that America shares more similarities with the poverty, like bad poverty you get in Western Europe or Northern Europe, when it doesn't. In my mind, the structure of the American class shares a lot more similarities with Brazil and India. I just think it's less visible. Like you don't have favelas, you don't have you don't have shanty towns on the scale of India. Like you have shanty towns in India, like 2 million people living and shit like that. Like it's absolutely insane, like Mumbai. But then you do have this crazy problem of homelessness in America. Like there's nothing for people. It's like if you don't have anything to offer the free market, just fuck off and die, basically. Mental health problems or physical disabilities that stop you from working, go and die, or have a meager social I don't know check every month that you can't live on, so you kind of do still have to work. If you fought in America's capitalist imperialist wars and you come home broken, mentally disturbed, PTSD, physically unable to work, well, maybe the VA will look after you. Maybe they'll tell you to go fuck yourself as well and treat you like crap. So yeah, like American society, in my opinion, is just so many fucking issues. Like the fact that what was the stat that is it most Americans can't afford a $400 emergency. This is in a country where you got to pay for healthcare, and most Americans can't afford a $400 emergency. What if you crash your fucking car and like break your legs? What if you I don't know, someone fucking hits you in the head at work? What if I don't know, what's an injury I've done? I broke my fucking nose playing football and cut my head open. I got an ambulance to the hospital. In America, I've read ambulance bills that cost fucking $4,000. $4,000 for an ambulance ride. An ambulance ride does not cost $4,000. MRI scans do not cost like $7,000, which I've seen. I've got a private MRI scan. I paid £300 for it. An insurance company charging you $9,000 or $7,000 for an MRI scan, obviously, is massively inflating the price to scam you. And it's like, you know, and there's so many problems. Like even like Bill Gates buying all the land or all the rent stuff. And I'm not. The thing is, I'm not. This is if people are getting like a bit butthurt about like, oh, where you're from the UK, so criticize that instead. The thing is, with America, I always say this: the UK is heading in a really bad direction as a country. Like I said, it's either going to be Poland in 20 years or like Putin's Russia in like 30 years. Like, I firmly believe that, or some variation of that. The problem the difference the UK, as I'd say, is every problem the UK has, and it has very many problems, America has it on steroids. Like, you know how we both share the same language, we to a degree share the same culture, but how the UK are like a bit more, how British people are like a bit more reserved, bit more like keeps to yourself, and Americans are like stereotypically like very loud and in your face. I feel like that's a good comparison with how badly our countries are run as well. Like, we have so many problems: poverty, mental health problems, violent problems, government corruption, run by like a very nationalistic right-wing party that does, you know, totally in bed with capital, like basically control the whole society. America just has that on steroids. But the thing is, and one thing I'll say about America, the good comparison is the British will keep it to themselves. I find British political corruption a lot more corrupt, where the reason our political parties are so corrupt is because they all go to school together. Like, all the Tories go to school with all the people who own the newspapers and all the people who own the TV stations and all the people who own the football clubs. They all go to school together. So they all know each other and they all do each other favours. That's the problem with the UK political corruption. The US is literally like, buy me. I'm a politician. Fucking buy me. Like, Israel lobby, buy me. Coal lobby, buy me. Oil lobby, buy me. I will not even give a shit how transparent this stuff is. I don't care. That is US politics. Where the UK is like, oh, like, I knew you from school, so here's a dodgy government loan that will only ever be exposed if like an independent left-wing newspaper digs it up, and then even then I won't fucking apologise. Where the US is like, oh yeah, like, I'm Nancy Pelosi, I get loads of money from AIPAC, let me just not ever condemn Israel for anything. El Gonzo, thanks so much for the $10 super chat. I really, really appreciate that. Someone else sent me a $2 one, I believe. Let me see if I can find it. But no, very, very nice of you. I really, really appreciate that. And someone else, whoever sent me the $1 or $2 one, really sorry I didn't get to that. All right, so we've had our little rant, I think. So I don't want to leave because I have so many people watching. But I do really need the bathroom because I've been drinking Monster Energy. I just need a piss or a wee, as we say. All right, I have to leave people with a question. I'll try and keep it quick. Wait, I actually have hand sanitizer, so maybe we can skip the washing my hands. So people always give me shit about how quick I wash my hands. So I'm gonna do it a tiny bit and then do it properly when I come back with my beautiful hand sanitizer that I keep around because of COVID paranoia. Okay. So here is the question. I'm going to be about 2 minutes going for. Okay. What is the question I will leave people with? All right. I've already asked the Trump one, so what one should I ask? All right. So I heard, people can tell me if you remember this. Someone told me when I was talking about 9/11 once, a lot of American conservatives celebrated 9/11. Like, I'm not making that up. Someone told me that was a thing because they hated New York. Like, because New York's seen as like a liberal left city. So here's a question for people. If there was a violent insurrection that succeeded in the United States, like a coup, a proper coup, done by a coalition of far-right militias, and they installed Donald Trump. Like I said, this is the context I'm going to give people, because I said this to you earlier in stream. They installed Donald Trump as dictator for life, and the person who would succeed him would be Donald Trump Jr. Every government post, basically like Trump administration, would be run by someone in his family or close to it. And the new constitution said that the Trump family will run America for the foreseeable future, right? They've been put in power, and then for some reason the US military's got on board. How many Republican voters and supporters, like percentage-wise again, how many would support that? How many would like that? How many would want that? Like, if you asked them. Okay, so that is the question for you guys, and then I'm gonna get back in about 2 minutes. Just gonna a little. I'll read out the best ones when I get back. All right, give me 1 second. All right, so let's see what people have said. The live hand washing for people. All right, so the only country that is more far right than American is probably Israel. I wouldn't agree with that necessarily. There's plenty of far right countries in Europe: Hungary, Russia, Ukraine, India, maybe Turkey, Poland. It's definitely up there though. I think what offsets it a bit is plenty of Americans do not. Obviously, you have a significant amount of Americans, millions of them, who do not agree with the far right. So people always do. I always do this to get the like residue off at the end. Brazil, yep, that's another one. Japan, yeah, Japan's a good one as well. Although Japan still has a quite big communist party. 80% at least people say. 90% would probably support it. I would just off myself if that happened and leave all my money to my family so they can save America. 70%, roughly 50%. So people say, someone else says, I don't think it's higher than like 30 or 35%. Living in Washington, 40% at a minimum supported. Maybe a few would open their eyes, but highly doubt it. Every Trump supporter in 2022 would. 35% of the total population, I mean, 50% at least, 60, 70%, 95%, 70, 35 at least, 87. So like, Trumpism has taken over the party so much, like even people like Liz Cheney and Mitt Romney are too moderate for these people. So who are these people who are going to on the conservative side that are going to stand against Trumpism? I don't see them. I don't know who they would be. I just can't. Because here's the thing. Someone tell me in the comments before we get onto these articles. What is the conservative argument against it at the moment? Like, if Donald Trump said, "I've got to be dictator because I've got to save America from the woke left, from their like gender ideology, from the woke corporations. I need to save America from these things." What would the conservative argument against that be? Like, I mean, they didn't care about anything else Trump did. Yeah. The Nippon Kaigi, like, all the elite people in the Liberal Party in Japan have ties to them. The Lincoln Project, yeah, that fucking scam. My dad was retired military and he changed his mind about the Jan 6th coup because after Fox News told him to blame Antifa. Yeah, like, all that shit about blaming the left for every bad thing that happens, like, that makes Republicans look bad is another part of it. All right, so let's move on then, because I have this article, which is a good one. Basically saying a lot of the shit I've been saying. So this is in reference to the Buffalo shooting. So can you guys see this okay? I think you can, but let me zoom in once. All right, so then we can talk about this. Okay, so I'm going to read out some of it for you. So, there's no such thing as a lone wolf. There are only those people who fed a steady diet of violent propaganda and stochastic terror take alienatory rhetoric to its logical conclusion. Such was the case on Sunday when a teenage white supremacist named Peyton Gendron opened fire in a supermarket in a black neighborhood in Buffalo, New York, killing 10 people while live streaming the carnage on Twitch. Prior to the shooting, he'd posted a 180-page manifesto in which he laid out his rationale. Clearly, he was an ardent adherent of what is called the Great Replacement Theory, the idea that white people in the US and white majority countries around the world are being systematically, deliberately outbred and replaced by immigrants and ethnic minorities in a deliberate attempt to rid the world of whiteness. It's a conspiracy theory that inspired terror attacks in New Zealand and Pittsburgh, San Diego, and El Paso, an ideology that marries demographic panic with the idea of a cunning, nefarious plot. Reading through the document, what struck me hardest, however, was how very close the killer's ideas were to the American mainstream, the white-hot core of American politics. Don't want to read all that bit. Okay, no, I don't want to read that bit about Charlottesville, but I'll start from here. The demographic of the United States The demographics of the United States are changing, and the share of the population considered white is shrinking. The change is occurring faster than anticipated thanks to the relative ages of white and non-white populations in the country, and all national population growth is being driven by non-white groups, according to analysis by Brookins. This confluence of death, birth, and immigration is in and of itself morally neutral, a matter of the natural ebb and flow of populations over time. But as the era of the white minority nears its end, as a revanchist, racist right has treated the facts of demography as an occasion for a sweeping, violent moral panic. And before we go any further, I tweeted about this the other day. I might get it up in a sec. Caring about like white majority is inherently racist because the notion of whiteness is a racist construct. So if people don't know, and maybe some of you don't know, I assume most of you do know this, race does not exist. Race is a social construct made up by Europeans in like the 14, 15, and 1600s to justify their superiority and racism. So there is no such thing as the white race. Like, if you even take a second to think about this, it's ridiculous, right? So I'm going to get this up for you guys, actually, because I posted this on Twitter the other day of someone being racist to me on YouTube, right? And you guys might think, look at you. How can someone be racist to you? Like, you're a white guy. How can someone be racist to you? And you'd be surprised, spending enough time on YouTube, that a fair few people are actually fucking racist to me. So this guy says to me, it's always the half-bred mutts like you that hate this because you have no culture of your own. You aren't accepted by your kin. So if you guys haven't heard the term mutt before, it's basically a white person who has like the blood of another group of people, right? In my case, I've been called like Jewish. I've been called, which they consider mutts as well. I've been called Jewish, Chechen, Russian, like Mongol Russian or whatever they like to call me. Muslim. Mutts are also like Greek and Spanish, like that's what they consider them, because to racists, like proper racists, the only real white person is basically a Northern European or a Scandinavian. So like Anglo, when you hear the term Anglo-Saxon as a dog whistle, that is like proper old school racism. It's like only Anglo-Saxons are the real white race. They are superior, they are pure, because they haven't been like, they're not mutts like me apparently. And that's the thing, right? Because you guys have to remember the notion of whiteness has always changed. So Anglo-Saxon used to be the whites, and that's what they believe themselves. Even though the Spanish and Portuguese created white supremacy, essentially, the Spanish and Portuguese created modern racial hierarchies as we know them today, with white people at the top and black people at the bottom in the racist view. That's the racial hierarchy with native and mixed race people all in between, Asian people as well. So that's the racist hierarchy. But what the English and the Northern Europeans did, because they were Protestants as well, they said to the Spanish and Italians, well, didn't you guys used to be owned by Arab empires, and you guys have darker skin, you have like me, like darker hair, darker features. Therefore, you actually have Muslim or Jewish blood in you. Like, you're not a real Christian. You're not really white. Only we are, because we haven't had this done to us. So that's like the really old school definition of like racist. And that's what happened, in America, in things like The Great Gatsby. People point this out, obviously. Like, whoever that Buchanan guy is, he's talking about like the white race stuff. That's what Anglo-Saxons believed in. And that's how in America, in the 1800s, Italians weren't considered white, Irish people weren't considered white, Jewish people never considered white, Greek people not white. Even if their skin was as pale as anything, they would not be considered white for multiple reasons. And then slowly, as American society became more assimilated to maybe Anglo culture a bit more, lots of these groups became accepted as white. Like, you're not going to get too many people in America today unless you're like one of the worst racists telling white and Irish people. You're not going to get most people saying Joe Biden, you are not white. Nancy Pelosi, you're Italian heritage, so you're not white either. You won't get most people doing that. And even in America, like with a lot of these institutions, a lot of Jewish people also considered white as well. And then that shows you how bullshit the term white is and the concept of a white race, because if there is a real white race, how come our definition of it always changes? So you get a guy like this calling me a mutt, saying I'm not white, and then you have a place like America where loads of people who weren't considered white like 100 years ago are actually considered white now. Because, yes, race does not exist. Race is bullshit. But the problem also is, I say that to you now, and like I'm saying in this thread, I say, we live in a racist world, so we can't ignore race, but must recognize its invention is not based on anything tangible. There is no white race, it's a fantasy, but things like white privilege are real because we live in a racist society that's been forced to accept race as a fact. So the reasons whites get privilege in a white supremacist society is because everyone gets indoctrinated, subtly or heavily, to accept white skin colour as the best and black skin colour as the lowest on the racial hierarchy. It's stuff everyone must combat to deprogram themselves. I always say, if you are a white person who grows up in a white majority country, you will have been indoctrinated in white supremacy. It's not your fault and you're not a bad person for this, but you have to take steps to remove these biases, and it takes a long time. So I'm not saying ethnicity doesn't exist or there's differences in stuff like that. Race is not a thing. White race is not a thing. Black race is not a thing. What would you even say, like Asian race? Did people say Asian race? Like, how can that be a thing? Like, Asia is insanely diverse. Like, how can that be a thing? So race does not fucking exist. So even caring about this shit is racist as hell. Like, remember that video of JonTron? I made like 2 videos on it where he's complaining about white replacement. Like, do you remember that with that debate with Destiny? JonTron was pushing the Great Replacement theory, and then Destiny's point, which is when Destiny wasn't a piece of shit, he kept saying, "Why does it matter? Why does it matter if whites become a sizable minority? Why does it matter if whites only make up 40% of America?" And then JonTron essentially could not elaborate without doing like racist dog whistles, because there is no such thing as a white culture. How is a Russian immigrant to the US the same as like a 8th gen immigrant from Scotland to the US? How are they the same? How is I don't know, a Greek person and a fucking Chechen person the same? How is a Bosnian person and someone from, I don't know, the Scottish Highlands the same? Just because they both have pale skin. How is an Iranian person and someone from Ireland the same? Just because they have white skin. White race is bullshit, and the concept of a white race, even if it's an inclusive one, like you just have to have white skin, is still inherently racist. And most of the time, people who believe in a white race don't actually believe all pale skinned people are white. You're not going to get many people who believe in like Great Replacement talking about like Iranians and Bosnians, because they're obviously, a lot of them are Muslims. So yeah, that's something you have to keep in mind. Like, white race, bullshit. White as a race is not a thing. Race does not exist. But the problem is, because we grow up in a society that treats race as a fact, and it's a white supremacist society, you have to accept the fact that, like, yes, things do happen based on race because we all perceive race. You cannot be colorblind. Like, I know I criticized The Amazing Atheist for this. Like, he was saying, like, oh, I'm colorblind, I don't see race. It's like, well, you do see race, because we all kind of have to see it now because we've been so indoctrinated to it. So you have to recognize, like, black people, like, generally, like, as a term, like, black people, like, it's no nuance there, are treated as a race by white people because they have certain views of a whole collection, a whole group of people based on just the color of their skin, that you need to, like, address and talk about, like, why people view them in a certain way. It's because you've been brainwashed through white supremacy to believe that black people are inferior to white people. And if you want to admit that or not, and that's the problem. There's a video, I don't think he's like a totally bad guy, but like Secular Talk, in the video I made about him, he's saying like diversity training is basically telling whites to hate themselves. And it's like, you have to be extremely fragile to take what I'm saying right now as me saying you have to hate yourself. Because the problem with the understanding of racism in Western countries is like, if you talk about racism, it's so binary. Like, if someone is a racist, they have to be like an ideological racist. People don't think there's such thing as just inheriting racism. So my point being is, everyone who is a white person, and even from other groups or in these countries, if you grow up in a white majority country, like I said in that tweet, you will be inherently, when you're born, probably you will be racist. And it doesn't mean you're going out saying slurs to people or you treat people different inherently based on the color of their skin, but you're born in a white supremacist society, so a lot of that is going to be absorbed by you, and you're going to have to combat that throughout your life, right? If you grow up in a white majority country in like rural United States and the only people you see are white people, do you think you're not going to be racist in some way? Even if your family are liberals and they tell you to like treat people, based on their character, not the color of their skin, do you not think you will have a degree of racism? Because you will. And that's just the fact. Even the existence of race proves that, because white race, black race, like that is a racist white supremacist construct that was made up hundreds of years ago. So that the problem is you're going to be a different level of racist, right? So for me personally, I have no problem saying this. Throughout my life, I was lucky enough that I went to school in like an extremely diverse part of London, like one of the most diverse. Have always had friends from like a variety of different backgrounds, like people who were like first gen immigrants from places like Ghana or Nigeria or India or Poland or anything like that. So I was lucky enough that throughout my childhood, I've never really known a world that was just white people or white English people, white Irish people. Pretty much because I went to Catholic school, everyone there had a background that wasn't English, and it could be completely different ones, right? So that's lucky for me because I grew up not really thinking about, well, you're this way because you're that race, or you're this way because you're that race. But then I would still admit, like, I would definitely admit that I had like inherent racism in me because of growing up in this society. And I'd say for me, probably manifested in like being bombarded with fear mongering about Muslims and terrorism and all this shit growing up. Like, if you're about my age, it was so easy to buy into this bigotry as a young person, not like a 18-year-old, but like as like a 12-year-old, 13-year-old, 9/11, 9/11, 7/7, 7/7. You start to view all these people like a bit more of suspicion because you're brainwashed to. You're brainwashed to. And like, while I didn't ever in my life have like racism against black people or other like non-white groups, I definitely think that part of my attraction to things like new atheism as like an 18-year-old was because of inherent racism I'd been indoctrinated in against Muslim people. And by Muslim people, I'm obviously, the way we're brainwashed about Muslims isn't that, oh, I see someone who believes in Allah or Muhammad and I hate them. It's like, no, the Muslim that is created in the media is an Arab. It's not like I said, it's not a Bosnian. It's not like a Paleo Iranian. It's an Arab. And even for a lot of people in these societies, they often think Sikhs are Muslim because they have a turban and a beard. So, they're brown, so they must be Muslim. So I'm perfectly, and that's the thing, like, people just need to be more open about it. I'm perfectly happy to talk about this. Like, I'm saying it on a live stream in front of 300 people on a channel that has like nearly 75,000 subscribers. I'm perfectly happy to say that although I wasn't like a racist, like how people believe racism is, I was totally indoctrinated with racism. And it's just something you can't escape. And the problem is, you're not a bad person for being indoctrinated into something. Like, you're not a bad person for being indoctrinated into religion. Like, I grew up Catholic. I'm not a bad person for being indoctrinated into this stuff. The bad part comes is when you get really defensive. It's like, I haven't a racist bone in my body. How could I be a racist? How can anyone ever call me one? I can't be a racist because I'm not in the KKK or I don't say slurs all the time. It's like, no. Especially if you're a white person, there is a lot of racism you're going to inherit. And there's a lot of societal racism you're going to absorb. And you're not even going to know it. And a lot of people can never address it because they're too sensitive about being called a racist themselves. So like I said, a lot of you in the chat will probably have a similar experiences to me, where you're like, when you get back and assess it, like I didn't like, I think there's a point, I forget when, I think it was the ISIS shit when I was 18 that made me think like, oh, hang on, like, this new atheism stuff is really racially charged. Like, I used to think like, oh, like, Islam is inherently like more violent, or Islam is inherently worse, and then blah blah blah. And I'd believe all this shit that like these new atheists would say, but then the ISIS stuff happened, and then they won't really like mask off, in my opinion, just being like total bigots. And I was like, I don't actually like, as much that I'm still an atheist and everything, I was like, I do not agree with new atheism, because I realized then, even though I probably didn't know this word for it, I realized that new atheism was just Western chauvinism, and it was like Western racism, and I never realized that before. But then I say I was susceptible to that message because I had absorbed a lot of like Muslim Arab racism growing up. And the thing is, it doesn't end when you're like a certain age and stuff, because like I said, I have like the perfect upbringing for a white person, essentially, in terms of, getting to see, like, so a lot of people, but the problem with them hating Muslims is they don't know any Muslims, right? It's very easy to make certain groups hate other groups and they don't know anyone, right? And for me, I was very lucky throughout my life, even with Muslims. Like, weirdly, even in my exclusively Catholic school, we actually did have some Muslim students who were accepted, and I think they were actually from Iran as well. But then I had that experience of getting to know loads of different people from different cultures and like backgrounds. But then even with, I think the lack of seeing many Muslim people, I think would have affected how I viewed Muslim people. Just, I knew loads of Indian people growing up, and I actually always say, like, one of my best friends is Indian right now. I feel I have more in common and a closer connection with a lot of the time with Indian people who grow up in London when I do with English people. And I've always said that I feel more of a connection with like people from immigrant background than I do with native English people. Like, I always have. But then like, and one of my best friends in university was Muslim as well. So I was lucky with that experience, and then just having, you need to see people as normal people to accept them. It happens all the time with Republicans, doesn't it? It's like they hate gay people, and then their child comes out as gay, and then they change. Like, sadly, people need actual experience a lot of the time of people in their lives to accept them. And I think it goes with transphobia as well. Like, homophobia, transphobia, racism, all this stuff, you have a degree of it in you. And I think only from learning more about it and actually exposing yourself to people from these groups can you actually change your views on these groups. And like I said, it doesn't have to be like I said, I'm a massive racist and I hate all this, I hate this color of skin, or I hate this religion. It doesn't manifest itself like that a lot of the time. It manifests itself on, I might have Muslim friends, but I kind of agree with Sam Harris about demographics and Muslim migration, like that type of shit. Do you know what I mean? Like, people are complicated, and people are often like massive hypocrites. So you can often be like not like a racist, but still believe a lot of racist things. Imagine what a little cuck you got to be to spam my chat with MAGA. Anyway, I got rid of it. Just gonna read some comments and then we're gonna keep going. Use a straw. It's going on a mustache. Yeah, Anime Tanky makes a good point. A lot of Americans and Western Europeans see Eastern Europeans like Poles, Hungarians, Russians as Asian. Yeah, especially you see a lot of the racism against Russians coming out, like calling them the Mongol hordes, right? This is literally people calling Russians Mongol hordes is literally like Nazi racism from the 30s and 40s. And I saw like the Washington Post writing a story of Putin looking like Genghis Khan and Russian soldiers looking like the Mongols. And it's like, it's just pure racism. But apparently, like, that's okay now because Ukraine are in a war with Russia, so you just get to be racist to Russian people now. All right, so let's keep going with this article about how fascism is essentially the mainstream part of conservatism in America now. All right. Sorry, I'm just a bit of gas, trying to just wait. All right, so the Republican Party's embrace of nativism has been more of a full-on dash than a slow slide. Sorry, and it has been catalyzed by the vast constellation of right-wing media. Chief among these is the juggernaut that is Fox News, as the New York Times analysis, blah blah. Sorry, I'm looking at my phone. Revealed the network's flagship show, Tucker Carlson Tonight, has an obsession with replacement theory. In more than 400 shows the newspaper analysed, Carlson evoked the idea of a forced demographic change through immigration and other methods. Carlson is not alone. A Media Matters examination of Fox's rhetoric throughout 2021 found that the network falsely embraced replacement theory, or as it had more commonly known among extremists, white genocide. Such fears have become commonplace campaign talking points among Republican candidates. Ohio senatorial candidate J.D. Vance recently declared that Democrats are bringing in a large number of new voters to replace those that are already here. In Arizona, far-right state senator Wendy Rogers responded to an article about migrants with the ominous message, "We are being replaced and invaded." Just hours after the mass shooting in Buffalo, Senate candidate Blake Masters posted a video appearance in which he declared the Democrats' electoral strategy involves bringing in millions of immigrants to vote for them. Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene rode extremism into Congress long after sharing a video that declared that an unholy alliance of leftists, capitalists, and Zionist supremacists have schemed to promote immigration with the deliberate aim of breeding us out of existence in our own homelands. This clamour from politicians and pundits, candidates and conspiracy theorists has become the radioactive centre of the right's policies. So let's talk about the manifesto a bit more. So in his manifesto, the shooter claims to have acted alone, while in the same breath admitting, I've had many influences from others. The 180-page of the document reveal the breadth of those influences. It's largely pastiche with page upon page of racist and anti-Semitic memes compiled in repulsive collages, collections of scientific studies of IQ between racial groups, screenshots and links to news articles that confirm his prejudices, and segments of other manifestos, including Tarrant's A Bloat, Thin Line of Racist Scrawl. He may have, as he claims, become radicalized by browsing 4chan, but his fixations mirror those of the right wing more broadly, from violent transphobia to a loathing of immigration to a preoccupation with the possibility of a civil war. When the rhetoric of an entire movement devolves into Manchian demonization, I'm saying it weird, demonization of their political foes, when demographic shifts are represented as apocalyptic, and when a party can appeal to nothing but the consolidation of white power, it is an inevitability that such rhetoric will leave bodies in its wake. The Republican Party caters chiefly now to those who claim to be born the wrong colour, is an act of genocide and attack, and an act with appropriate fervour. There has never been a lone wolf when it comes to racist terror in the US. It suffuses. I'm learning a lot of new words. I thought it was quite well read. Every aspect of our politics and policy, and in later years, the mass howl of fear at change comes from the jaw that drips with blood. As long as we fail to recognise the wellspring of racial animus that animates the right wing in this country, the corpses will continue to accrue. So yeah, that article was basically good at summing up that this is not like a fringe position at all in the Republican Party. Like, especially that bit about how recently, so many of them have been campaigning on white replacement and white genocide. And to them, they think it, even if they think they're not racist, which is totally bizarre, they think it makes sense. Like, oh, well, immigrants love handouts, so immigrants come here and they'll vote for the Democrats, who are the left-wing party or some shit like that. But yeah, like, I mean, these people don't even pretend, right? It's not even like old republicanism where it's like, we can be the party for everyone, even though that's bullshit. But it's like, yeah, if you're an immigrant background and you're non-white, you're trying to replace us Native Americans. Marjorie Taylor Greene was in the Anglo-Saxon caucus, which lasted for about a week, if you want to know how fucking racist she is. And then there's another article. I don't know if I want to read this one, but let me just skim through it. All right, I think I'll read this. Oh. I think I'll read this quick because it compares Tucker Carlson's rhetoric to the mass shooters. So I think it's important to show how similar they are. And I saw other people on Twitter basically posting quotes of both of them and asking, like, how are these even different? So let's go through them. Let's just read the quotes, actually. So here's a quote from Tucker Carlson. But why? To change the racial mix of this country, that's the reason. To reduce the political power of people whose ancestors lived here and dramatically increase the proportion of Americans newly arrived from the third world. This is the language of eugenics. It's horrifying, but there's a reason Biden said that. In political terms, this policy is called the Great Replacement, the replacement of legacy Americans with more obedient people from faraway peoples. Again, just sounds like a Nazi at this point, but that's the face of American republicanism. So more stuff by Tucker. Since taking the White House 6 months ago, the Biden administration has, from the very beginning, used immigration to change the demographic mix of our country, not to improve the country or the lives of the people who come here, but to flood the US with new, loyal Democratic voters so America becomes a one-party state in perpetuity. This is their version of democracy, or if you don't like the outcome, you just change the electorate. That's true. They just won the fucking election. Also, I do find it funny that they don't acknowledge that loads and loads of Asian people and also loads of Latino people vote Republican. A lot of it based on anti-communism. It's true. You're absolutely not allowed to acknowledge this is happening. If you do, they will scream at you're a conspiracy nut. You're a bigot. Yep, you're both of those. You must be silenced forever. We learned that the hard way a couple months ago. The Great Replacement theory is a lie. They yelled. George Soros has nothing to do with that. Stop talking. Carlson is not naming the Jews, but there is a paper-thin difference between blaming a Jewish financier, who is the object of anti-Semitic obsession, as the orchestrator of a global plot, and naming Jewish people. So here is the actual shooters lines. How precisely is diversity our strength? Since you've made this our new national motto, please be specific if you can. Oh no, wait. This is Tucker Carlson again. How precisely is diversity our strength? Since you made this our new national motto, please be specific as you explain it. Can you think, for example, of other institutions such as, I don't know, marriage or military units, in which less people have in common the more cohesive they are? And here, via Max Boot, is Gendron's version, the shooter. Why is the diversity said to be our greatest strength? Said throughout the media, spoken by politicians and celebrities, but no one ever seems to give a reason why. What gives a nation strength, and how does diversity increase that strength? Just ending. Carlson is not directing his audience to commit murder, but he's spreading an ideology that lends itself naturally to murderous tendencies and accordingly spawned a violent wing. White nationalists see Carlson as their champion, and so too does the vast majority of the conservative movement. Carlson, like Trump, serves as a bridge between the Republican Party and a movement once seen as too extreme and marginal for the party to touch. The defences of Carlson will ensure that the power of white nationalism continues to grow along with its body count. So basically just trying to show how his rhetoric is the same. I mean, I think Tucker Carlson's a good example. And so like anti-vaxxers and white supremacists, I know that often goes hand in hand. Like, I know they would be more attracted to Republicans, but at the same time, the Republican Party didn't basically used to campaign on these things, where like with Trump, the anti-vax stuff doesn't stick as much because he actually is vaccinated and believes in that kind of science. He's a germaphobe, but at the same time, they don't try and hide it, right? It's like Ben Shapiro inspiring like that fucking shooter as well. It's like their rhetoric is so fucking inflammatory and racist, and it's not hidden. It's so easy to just radicalize people on it, and it's really, really not surprising they do get radicalized. And that's literally like a whole half of the political spectrum in the US now is this. It's just absolute explicit fascism and racism. And I just don't think you can really reach out to these people now, because not only are they fascists, a lot of these people, they're also, and sometimes these do go hand in hand, a lot of the time it does, they're also massive conspiracy theorists. So even people saying like Jan 6 was done by Antifa, for example, like that sort of shit. Like, how can you believe that? But they do believe it. Antifa everywhere. George Soros, all this anti-Semitic bullshit. Like, how do you deprogram someone's brain from all that? One sec. Let's read some comments. But anyway, and the thing is, like, I was saying earlier about the abortion stuff. There's just the Democrats just have like no pushback to any of this, and they don't even want to address it for some reason. Like even this insane racism, like tying the Republic. I guess like the Democrats still operate on this belief that like politics should be civil and you shouldn't say like mean things to Republicans because that wouldn't be a good thing. How many people saying there's a few Nazis in the chat? Where are they? Report Steve. Who's Steve? Okay. Is that the only one? I got him now. There's another one. One sec. I'm just cleaning the chat. There we go. Admiral Carter as well. All right. Where's this person? What did Admiral Carter do? The Purge, I love it. No, I haven't banned you. Someone said you did something. I'm asking what you've done. Okay, he's innocent. All right, fine. No ban coming. Yeah, purging is a bit fun. Base purge. Okay. How do you define fascism? So I was talking about this earlier with fascism, is that like you had the Bush administration's fascism of it's like this insane hyper nationalism to basically, and it's like I guess someone described India as like fascism in a democratic system, which isn't like a traditional view of fascism in that India is not like a fascist state, but the apparatus of the state is run by fascists right now. And I feel that's kind of similar with America, although I feel like, yeah, I say that's maybe a bit of a good comparison with America as well, where like it's not necessarily a fascist state, even though I would argue there's a lot of shit in America inherently that is fascist. But it's like with Bush, it's like this is a fascist group of people who use fascism to hold on to power, or like spread fascism to hold on to power. Same with Donald Trump. Whereas now, like I was reading that article, it's literally like we will spread fascist conspiracy theories to get power, and if we get power, we'll make it hard for us to lose it, and we will actually act on this fascist conspiracy theories. Like I have this up here now, right? Big conspiracy in America is like voter fraud is a massive problem. So now you have Ron DeSantis doing shit like this. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed a bill creating a police unit dedicated to investigating voter fraud, right? Do you think these policemen will actually investigate voter fraud, or will they make sure Republicans win elections? Again, this is pretty fascist, isn't it? And the problem as well is what helps in a lot of these cases is capitalism generally does not have a problem with fascism. And capitalism or capitalists will always choose a fascist over a leftist or a communist, like every single time. Look, there's capitalists in Germany. German corporations got a benefit from being in bed with the government. Obviously, a lot of the riches that was stolen from just Europe in general, but of course, loads of Jewish people, often given to these corporations, got big contracts for the military and everything like that. And it just becomes like, if Ron DeSantis becomes president, rigs the electoral system in such a way that it basically becomes impossible for the Republicans to lose ever again. Do you think most corporations, American or otherwise, will stop doing business in America? Like, I don't think they will stop doing business in America. And I mean, it's will the companies that are in bed with the American government right now, will they stop doing business with America? I doubt it. if America just becomes increasingly fascist, I think most corporations won't have a problem with it. As long as they still are able to make money, basically. And it's even like DeSantis' war against Disney is literally just based on LGBT culture war, and that's it. Yeah, Fanta the Nazi drink. Yeah, got to create a version of Coke for the Nazis. So just like, in my opinion, I've said for a long time, American conservatism is just fascism. Like, that's just what it is. And it's becoming clearer and clearer. If Trump wasn't clear enough... Okay, here's a good example, right? Loads of Republicans hated Trump. And the Republican establishment hated Trump. Loads of American politicians, Lindsey Graham, Ted Cruz, hated Trump. What happens when Trump becomes president? They all get in line, right? None of them criticize him anymore. All do his agenda in the Senate, campaign for this guy, talk about how great he is. They all get in line, and that's a good kind of example of like how capitalism gets in line for fascism. Is like, here is two people who probably personally don't like Trump very much, but then they're bankrolled by the same people. So once he wins, well, it's like, we'll get in line. You both work for us. Like, you both work for this corporation or that corporation. So in terms of this sort of thing, just get in line and doing our agenda, right? And Trump can ban Muslims from entering the country, not a big deal. Brutalize people at the border, no big deal. More drone strikes without any oversight, no big deal. He's doing what we want, basically. He's making us more money. He's passing tax cuts for the rich, and that's all they care about. Whereas you can bet if a communist won the election and started nationalizing all American oil, they'd probably have something to say. Probably have a hand in trying to get that person assassinated. Little Fox, thanks so much for the $5 base cab. Love your work. Thanks so much for all the Discord stuff. Although I don't post on it as much anymore. I've just been really busy actually. So I haven't been active on Discord as much. Yeah. All right, so I think I'll look at trying to wind the stream down. I haven't streamed as long as normal, but I literally did just talk for nearly 2 hours, which I don't normally do as much. So it took it out of me a bit. So yeah, tomorrow's video, I'm going to be talking about this a bit more. So I want to make a video about why white supremacists give Asians such a pass. And I've made a couple of videos on this before, but it ties in a bit nicely with the white replacement shit. Whereas, like, why do a lot of Nazis like or tolerate Asians compared to other groups of people they don't tolerate? So yeah, I want to talk about that tomorrow. Because people were saying, like, how much does anime have an influence on people becoming Nazis because of the 4chan shit? So yeah, I would definitely talk about that tomorrow. And I know I've made actually a lot of videos on this topic, so this video will kind of be like bringing that all together in reference to the shooter's manifesto, I guess. And then on Wednesday or Thursday probably, I'm gonna make a video about it's been like a long time coming, but like the right wing saying that Star Trek has gone woke. There was an article on Fox the other day that said Star Trek has gone where it's never gone before. It's now gone woke. Star Trek's gone woke. So we'll be talking about that as well. And then for Friday's video, I have no fucking clue. So we'll have to see this week what that one will be. It is nice to have my video ideas already locked in for this week, especially because the channel has been doing a tiny bit better the last couple of weeks, which has been good. Star Trek was always right. Yeah, exactly. Fucking exactly it was. Katie, thanks so much for the $5 super chats. Let me just see what you said. I read your Patreon message. Oh shit, I forgot. I haven't been on Patreon in a while. I don't generally go on Patreon or anything at the weekend because I'd like to have a complete break. I'll have a look in a sec. I don't know what you wrote. um, yeah, Jude. The thing is, I haven't even watched much Star Trek in my life. Like only like some because my dad likes it a lot. I've never been big on it, but even I know like why it's more meant to be more progressive. And I guess there's like, I guess when I research a video, I'll find like there's some more, I don't know, conservative messaging in some of it. I kind of highly doubt it because it's like it's meant to be like the opposite of Cowboy Bebop. It's like more like a utopian view of the future rather than a dystopian view of the future. Um, Iso Ranger Gaming, thanks so much for calling me the best. um, so I'm just reading some of your comments. Well, Star Trek's becoming dystopian when they start to talk about Elon Musk being great. Damn Godzilla, type in Kavernacle Tanky and you'll see my video on tankies. Basically, I think the term's pretty meaningless these days. Because I don't even consider people like Jimmy Dore or what's his name, Jackson Hinkle, or is it Jason Hinkle? I don't even know what the fuck his name is. And that Haas guy. I don't consider them tankies. They're not even communists. They're just fucking far right chauvinists in my opinion. There's nothing communist about them. Maybe because, they love fucking Russia for some reason. Um they're red browns. I wouldn't even. I'd just say they're not even red. Yeah, thanks, Blue Barrymore. Yeah, for sure. I know that like the interracial kiss thing and stuff. Yeah, anime tanky. It's not so much they find Asian women hot. It's just it's a racist view of Asian women of being subservient and obedient. Um, so yeah. All right. So I think that's it for the stream. Thanks so much for so many of you watching. I had like 300 people watching for like the whole thing, which is pretty cool. I think that's one. My most viewed stream was like 400 or 500, but 300 is still pretty sick. Um, I will try and upload my stream archives more because I've been slacking a bit. I definitely have one I'm gonna upload just right now. This one will probably go up tomorrow if you want to rewatch some of it. I actually think it was a really good stream. I was actually just considering right now posting it, editing it, and posting it on the channel. The only problem is I kind of just don't want to do anything for the rest of me being awake today. So if I was a bit more motivated, I probably would cut this up and stick it on the main channel. But because I was spitting pure fire, I think. But yeah, I'm not lazy, but doing 3 days of making videos in a week is probably enough for me. So yeah. Anyway, yeah. Thanks so much for tuning in. Thanks for all the super chats, people. I really appreciate them. Check out the video from Friday, which was fun, and the Brett Cooper one from Wednesday. And yeah, stay tuned for the video tomorrow related to this stuff. Another video on Thursday, like I said, about Star Trek. And then one more video on Friday about I don't even know what. So yeah. And yeah, check out the second channel for the archives of other live streams. And I will live stream again on Wednesday, so hope to see a lot of you there as well. And have a good start to your week. I'll be gaming.